I still remember the night that changed everything. When my parents called me for a family dinner, I thought it was just that, dinner. A casual evening, some small talk, maybe even a rare moment of warmth. But the second I stepped into that restaurant, I felt something was off. Everyone was already there. My parents, my sister Marissa, and even my Aunt Claire. They were smiling, whispering, glancing at me like I was the last piece of a puzzle they'd already put together. I didn't think much of it at first. I sat down, poured myself some water, tried to relax. But then, my father cleared his throat. "Eden," he said, with that tone he always used when he was about to drop something on me. "Your sister has been going through a hard time, so she'll be moving into your house, just until she figures things out." For a moment, I couldn't even process his words. My house? My space? And just like that, without even asking me, I looked around the table, expecting anyone to be as shocked as I was. But the way they all avoided my eyes told me the truth. They already knew. They had planned this, discussed it, agreed to it, without me. I felt the air squeeze out of my chest. Aunt Claire was already smiling politely, as if this was all settled. My mother was nodding, saying, "It's for the best, honey. Marissa just needs a little support right now." Support. That was their word for it. But what they really meant was, "Eden, you'll carry her again, like you always do." And then, as if twisting the knife, Marissa leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and smirked at me. "Don't worry, sis," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'll try not to ruin your boring little routine." In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't part of this family. I was their safety net, their invisible bank account, the one they could use and discard as they pleased. And I sat there, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself not to break. I knew this dinner wasn't just about Marissa moving in. It was about me, finally waking up. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word in my head. And suddenly, all the memories came flooding back. The credit card bills, the desperate late-night calls from Marissa. "Eden, please, just this once. I swear I'll pay you back." I always believed her. I always bailed her out. I see myself standing at the bank, signing the paperwork to cover her debt, my stomach in knots. And still, she smiled like she was entitled to it. Then came the car loan. My parents begged me to co-sign. "Marissa just needs a reliable car to get back on her feet," they said. I signed the papers. She got the car, I got the sleepless nights, praying she wouldn't default. And when the house repairs piled up at my parents' place, the leaking roof, the broken water heater, guess who they called? Not a contractor, not a bank, me. Every single time I pulled out my wallet, I told myself it was for family. I told myself they would see my sacrifices, appreciate me, maybe even, just once, respect me. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough, because in their eyes, I wasn't a daughter. I was an ATM, a machine that only mattered when they needed cash. And the worst part? They never even asked how I was doing. Not once did they ask if I was struggling, if I could afford it, if I was happy. I gave and gave until I was empty, and yet I was still invisible. I sat alone that night, staring at the stack of bills on my desk, my heart heavier than it had ever been. And finally, I whispered to myself the truth that had been buried for years. They don't even know who I really am. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest. But instead of breaking down, something inside me shifted. I was done being their safety net, done being their invisible provider. If my family wanted to pretend I didn't matter, then I'd make sure they finally saw the truth. So I sat at my desk, pulled out an empty folder, and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I wasn't handing over money. I was collecting evidence. One by one, I dug through my emails and bank records, receipts for Marissa's credit card payments, invoices for my parents' house repairs, the car loan documents with my signature scrawled at the bottom. Each piece of paper felt like a scar I had carried in silence. And now, I was finally stitching them together. Hour after hour, I worked. Spreadsheets filled with dates, amounts, account numbers, folders labeled by year, each one heavier than the last. With every page I printed, my pain began to change. It hardened into something else: resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about years of being dismissed, overlooked, and used. And I refused to let them pretend it never happened. By midnight, the floor around me was covered in stacks of paper, evidence of every sacrifice they had forgotten. I gathered it all, hole-punched each sheet, and slid it into a thick black binder. When I closed the cover, the word on the label seemed to echo through the room: truth. I ran my hand over the binder, my jaw tight, my heartbeat steady. For the first time, I felt powerful. I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was their reckoning. By day, I lived a different life. At work, people actually saw me. They valued me. My consulting firm had grown from a tiny idea in my spare bedroom to a thriving business with clients across the city. My colleagues admired my leadership. Clients respected my judgment. And when I walked into a room, people listened. I wasn't just useful. I was powerful. And yet, the second I stepped outside of that world, I became invisible again. At home, I wasn't the woman who built her own empire from scratch. I wasn't the strategist who saved multi-million-dollar companies. No, to my parents, I was just a wallet, a disposable resource they could call whenever Marissa stumbled. Again, sometimes I would lie awake at night, staring at the glow of my laptop, wondering how they could be so blind. They think I'm only good for fixing their mess, but they have no idea the empire I've built. It was almost laughable. The same parents who dismissed me at dinner parties, the same sister who mocked my boring little routine, had no clue that behind my calm smile, I was running an entire empire they couldn't even dream of. But their blindness wasn't harmless. It was exhausting. Because no matter how much I gave, no matter how many bills I covered, they always came back for more. And just when I thought maybe, just maybe, they would let me breathe, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was urgent, almost rehearsed. "Eden, sweetheart, Marissa is behind on rent again. Could you just cover it, just this one last time?" The words "one last time" burned into me. I had heard them before. Every time it was the last, and every time I was the fool who believed them. But not anymore. I stared at the phone, my hand trembling, not from fear this time, but from a growing, unshakable resolve. I didn't invite them, but still they came. My parents, my sister, even my aunt, like some kind of jury summoned to pass judgment on me. They sat in my living room, sipping coffee I hadn't offered, waiting for me to fold again. "Eden," my father began, his tone carrying that familiar weight of expectation. "Family supports family. Your sister is struggling, and you have more than enough. Don't be so cold." Marissa smirked, lounging on the edge of my sofa, like she already owned the place. "Yeah, Eden, don't act like it's such a big deal. It's not like you have a life anyway. You work, you pay, you keep the world running. That's what you're good at." Their words didn't pierce me this time, because I had come prepared. Without a word, I stood. I walked to my desk, pulled out the heavy binder I had spent weeks compiling. On the cover, in black letters, one word: truth. I set it down on the coffee table with a thud. The sound made Marissa flinch. Page by page, I began to turn. Credit card bills. Paid. car loans, co-signed, rent checks, written by me, home repairs, covered. Every page was a piece of my life they had stolen, disguised as helping family. The room grew silent. The weight of the evidence filled the air, pressing down on every smug expression, every dismissive remark they had ever thrown at me. Finally, my mother's voice cracked, soft but defensive. "You kept records?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady, "because I knew this day would come. The day you would push too far. I would have to prove just how much I've given, and how little I've ever been seen." Marissa's face twisted, her voice sharp with venom. "You think this makes you a saint? You think this makes you better than us? You're pathetic, Eden, a parasite who needs us to give her purpose." Her words echoed in the room, but this time, they didn't sting. I closed the binder, placed my hand on it like a final verdict, and met their eyes. All of them. "This ends tonight." The silence after my words didn't last long. My father's face turned red, his voice rising with the kind of fury he usually saved for strangers. "How dare you keep score like this, Eden? Families don't keep ledgers. Families sacrifice for each other." My mother chimed in, her voice sharp and trembling. "Do you hear yourself? You're tearing this family apart. All because you want to make yourself look like a victim." I wanted to scream, to remind them that for years, I had been the one holding everything together, that if anyone had torn the family apart, it was their endless enabling, their blindness, their refusal to see me. But I didn't scream. I just sat there, because for the first time, I didn't need their approval. Marissa shot up from the couch, her eyes blazing with rage. "Fine," she spat. "If you don't want to help me, then don't. You'll regret this, Eden. You'll regret turning your back on your own sister." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The house felt empty and heavy all at once. My parents muttered bitter words as they followed her, throwing one last look of disappointment over their shoulders. And then, it was quiet. I sat there in the wreckage of the moment, my binder of truth still on the table. A war raged inside me. Guilt clawed at me. Had I gone too far? Was I really destroying my family? But then, another feeling began to rise. Lighter, stronger. Liberation. For once, I had said no. For once, I had chosen me. A hand touched my shoulder gently. I turned to see Dorothy, my mother's sister, the quiet one who usually stayed out of the chaos. Her eyes were kind, steady. "You're not wrong, Eden," she whispered. "You've carried them for too long. It's not selfish to set them down." Her words sank deep into me, soft but powerful. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Later that night, after they had all gone, I sat at my desk staring at my laptop. Among the clutter of unread emails, one subject line stood out. "New townhouse available, move-in ready." I opened it and my heart skipped. It wasn't just a listing. It was a possibility, a sanctuary, my own place, untouched by their demands. I leaned back in my chair, a small, trembling smile forming on my lips. The first time I turned the key in the door, it felt unreal. The townhouse was mine, not my parents', not Marissa's, not tied to anyone else's strings, just mine. I walked through the empty rooms, sunlight spilling across bare floors, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. The days that followed became a montage of small, quiet victories, painting the walls in colors I chose, placing books on shelves where no one would touch them, framing photos that reminded me of strength, not obligation. And one evening, I sat by the window, a steaming cup of tea warming my hands. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in longer than I could remember. As the steam curled upward, my voice found words I had been waiting to say for years. Family isn't blood. It's trust, respect, safety. It wasn't that I had lost my family. It was that I was finally finding one within myself. The pain that once weighed me down was shifting, transforming into something else: empowerment. I thought I had closed the door on them forever, but just as I was settling into my peace, a knock echoed through the house. I opened the door, and there they were, my parents. My father's face was solemn. My mother's eyes searched mine. "We need to talk." They sat across from me at my own kitchen table, suddenly smaller than I'd ever seen them. Their voices weren't sharp this time. They were pleading. "Eden," my mother began, her hands twisting nervously. "Your sister just needs a little stability. If you could help Marissa get her own place, just until she finds her footing." The words washed over me like an old, broken record. Always Marissa. Always me being the answer. I folded my hands in front of me, calm and steady. "For years," I said, "I've been the safety net, the fixer, the wallet. But I'm not doing charity anymore." My father bristled, ready to argue, but I raised a hand. "Don't misunderstand me," I continued. "I'm not leaving her with nothing. But this time, if Marissa wants stability, she'll have to earn it." I slid a folder across the table. Inside, a simple job listing. An entry-level position at my firm. Nothing glamorous, but enough to cover a one-bedroom apartment. My parents blinked in shock. They hadn't expected this. Because in that moment, it was clear I wasn't their pawn anymore. I was the one setting the terms. The silence shattered when Marissa burst out laughing. "Are you kidding me?" she scoffed. "You expect me to take some basic job in your boring little company? That's beneath me." Her words didn't cut me this time. In fact, they only proved everything I had said. I stood, calm as ever, and placed a single business card on the table. "If she ever decides she's ready to grow up," I said softly, "she knows where to find me." And with that, I walked away, leaving the card behind like a lifeline she didn't even realize she would one day need. Months passed, and in that time, the world around me shifted, quietly but undeniably. My parents, they were different now. Gone was the tone of entitlement, the endless demands wrapped in guilt. When they called, it wasn't to tell me what I owed them. It was to ask my opinion, to seek my advice, not as a daughter they could use, but as a woman they were finally beginning to respect. It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard. But for the first time in my life, there was humility in their voices. And then, Marissa. At first, I thought she would never call. Her pride was too sharp, her anger too loud. But one morning, I heard a whisper through the office walls. A new hire, stumbling through the ropes, under supervision. Marissa. She had taken the job. I didn't confront her. I didn't gloat. I simply watched from a distance as she struggled. Late nights, frustrated sighs, the endless battle of learning responsibility. But underneath it all, there was something I had never seen in her before. Effort. For the first time, she wasn't leaning on me. She was standing, wobbly, clumsy, but standing, on her own. And one evening, as I settled into my townhouse with a cup of tea, I heard a faint knock at the door. When I opened it, there was no one there, only the sound of hurried footsteps retreating down the hall. But on the other side of the door, barely audible, I caught it. A whisper. "Thank you." I stood frozen, my heart heavy and light all at once. It was dinner again. But this time, it wasn't at my parents' house. It wasn't in some restaurant where I was expected to pick up the tab. It was here, in my townhouse, my sanctuary. The home I had built on my own terms. The table was simple, but it was mine. Candles flickered softly. Plates clinked gently. And for the first time in years, there was no tension, no hidden agenda. My parents sat across from me, quieter than usual, not with judgment, but with something else. Humility. My father cleared his throat, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Eden, we didn't see you. Not the way we should have. You've carried more than we ever realized." And we were wrong. My mother nodded, her eyes glistening. I thought I was protecting the family, but I was only protecting Marissa's weakness. I'm sorry, sweetheart. The words didn't erase the years of pain, but they mattered because for once, they weren't dismissing me. They were acknowledging me. And then Marissa spoke. Her voice was quieter, stripped of its usual sharpness. You're not bullying, Eden. You're strong. Stronger than I'll ever be. And I see that now. I sat there, letting the moment settle around me. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with peace. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about finally being seen. I looked down at the table where the old binder of truth sat. The one that had once been my shield, my evidence, my lifeline. I closed it gently, my reflection smiling back at me from its glossy cover. And in that moment, my voice spoke the truth I had waited a lifetime to say. For years, they saw me as nothing but their safety net. But I've built something more than wealth. I've built boundaries, and that is priceless.